Sometimes the rot doesn't start in the mailroom, it starts in the boardroom, wrapped in expensive suits and polished smiles. I thought I'd seen every shade of corporate deceit, but the day I stumbled on a $650K bribe, hidden under layers of strategic partnership paperwork, I learned just how far a CEO will go to protect his empire, and how far I was willing to go to burn it to the ground. My name is Natalie Brooks, and at 38, I'd built my entire career on one principle: the rules exist for a reason. As compliance director at Northgate Logistics, I was the guardian at the gate, the one who made sure our multi-billion-dollar transportation empire stayed on the right side of federal regulations. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was mine, and I was damn good at it. The morning everything changed started like any other. I arrived at our Chicago headquarters at 7:30 a.m. sharp, black coffee in hand, ready for the executive leadership meeting. The 20th floor conference room hummed with its usual pre-meeting energy leather portfolios slapping onto the mahogany table, the aggressive small talk of people who measured their worth in quarterly earnings. Richard Vaughn swept in at 8 a.m. precisely, his silver hair catching the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Our CEO had the kind of presence that made board members lean forward and junior executives straighten their spines. I'd respected him once, back when I thought his ruthlessness was just good business. "Before we dive into the quarterly projections," Richard announced, his voice carrying that practiced warmth that never quite reached his eyes, "I want to recognize someone who's been absolutely instrumental in securing our new West Coast expansion." My fingers tightened around my Mont Blanc pen. I'd been leading the West Coast project for 14 months, navigating the maze of California environmental regulations, union negotiations, and permit applications. My team had worked 60-hour weeks to make it happen. "Ethan Cole," Richard continued, gesturing to the man sitting 3 seats down from me, "has shown exceptional leadership in bringing this project to fruition." The words hit me like ice water. Ethan Cole, 32 years old, hired 6 weeks ago as Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives. His main qualification, as far as I could tell, was being Richard's golf buddy from the country club. He had the kind of easy smile and firm handshake that opened doors, but ask him about DOT compliance regulations and watch his eyes glaze over. "Thanks to Ethan's vision," Richard went on, while my vision started to tunnel, "we're ahead of schedule and under budget." Ahead of schedule. My schedule. Under budget, my negotiations with contractors had saved us $4 million. The room erupted in polite applause. I felt my face arrange itself into something resembling a smile while my mind raced through the congratulations and backslapping. I caught Ethan's eye. He had the decency to look uncomfortable, shifting in his Italian leather chair like he knew he was wearing a crown that didn't fit. "Of course," Richard added, his gaze finally finding me. "We appreciate all the groundwork from the compliance team. Natalie, your documentation has been thorough." Thorough. Like I was a secretary who'd done a particularly good job with the filing. "Moving forward," he continued, "Ethan will be taking point on all strategic partnerships related to the expansion. Natalie, I'm sure you'll provide whatever support he needs to ensure we maintain our compliance standards." Support. After 14 months of 18-hour days, of fighting with regulators who wanted to bury us in red tape, of finding creative solutions to impossible problems, I was being relegated to support staff for someone who couldn't tell a bill of lading from a grocery list. "Absolutely," I heard myself say, my voice steady as granite. "Whatever the team needs." The meeting droned on revenue projections, market analysis, the usual corporate theater, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching Richard and Ethan, noting the subtle signals between them, the way Richard deferred to Ethan's opinions on matters the younger man clearly didn't understand, the way Ethan kept glancing at his phone, texting under the table while others presented. As the meeting concluded, Richard called out, "Natalie, a moment." The room emptied, leaving us alone with the ghost of my evaporated recognition. "I know this might feel like a shift," Richard said, his tone patronizing, "but Ethan brings fresh perspectives. Sometimes we need to step back and let new talent shine." "Fresh perspectives," I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the words. "You're invaluable to this organization," he continued, the lie rolling smoothly off his tongue. "Your attention to detail, your methodical approach, It's exactly what Ethan needs to complement his strategic vision. Methodical. In corporate speak, that meant boring, unimaginative, replaceable. I stood, gathering my papers with deliberate precision. I understand perfectly, Richard. And I did. I understood that merit meant nothing if you didn't have the right golf handicap. I understood that 14 months of my life had just been handed to someone else like a party favor. Most importantly, I understood that this wasn't about fresh perspectives or strategic vision. This was about something else entirely. I just didn't know what yet. But I was going to find out. The first red flag came just 3 days later. Ethan burst into my office at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday, his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled, clutching a folder like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Natalie, I need you to fast-track this compliance review," he said, dropping the folder on my desk. "Richard wants it signed by Monday morning." I opened the folder to find a contract with a company I'd never heard of, Silver Rail Freight. My eyes scanned the terms, and my stomach dropped. This wasn't just a standard shipping agreement, it was a comprehensive strategic partnership that would give Silver Rail exclusive rights to our Pacific Northwest routes. "This needs at least 2 weeks of review," I said, flipping through pages of convoluted legal language. "We need to verify their DOT credentials, insurance coverage, safety records." "We don't have 2 weeks," Ethan interrupted, his jaw tight. "They're offering us rates 30% below market. If we don't move now, they walk." 30% below market. In logistics, that wasn't a red flag. It was a parade of them. Nobody operated that far below market unless they were cutting corners or planning to renegotiate once you were dependent on them. "Ethan, Clause 47B, I pointed to a section buried in the middle of the contract. "If we fail to meet minimum shipment quotas, which are set impossibly high, we're liable for penalties up to $8 million per quarter." He waved his hand dismissively. "Standard business terms. Richard's reviewed it personally." "Has legal seen this?" "Weekend skeleton crew. That's why I need you." His smile was practiced, the kind you learn in MBA programs. "Richard specifically said you're the only one he trusts to handle this efficiently." Efficiently, code for rubber stamp it without asking questions. I spent the weekend dissecting every line of that contract. The more I read, the worse it got. Silver Rail Freight was incorporated just 6 months ago. Their listed address was a virtual office in Delaware. Their insurance certificates had inconsistencies that suggested forgery. But the real poison pill was hidden in subsection 15C3. Any dispute would be handled by arbitration in Panama, under Panamanian law. I drafted a 6-page memo outlining every concern, complete with citations from federal regulations they'd potentially violate. I sent it to Richard, Ethan, and CC'd the entire board of directors at 11:58 p.m. on Sunday night. Monday morning's response was swift and brutal, not in writing. Of course, Richard was too smart for that. Instead, I found myself mysteriously removed from the email chain discussing the contract. My keycard suddenly didn't work for the executive conference room. The weekly compliance meeting I'd run for 3 years, rescheduled to a time when I had a conflict. But the coup de grace came Tuesday afternoon, an email from Richard to all department heads, with me conspicuously CC'd rather than included in the main recipient list. "Team, as we streamline our operations for maximum efficiency, we're adjusting some procedural workflows. Strategic partnership approvals will now route directly through Ethan Cole's office, with compliance serving in an advisory capacity as needed." Advisory capacity, as needed. I'd been neutered as effectively as if they'd changed my title to Chief Suggestion Officer. I watched from my office as Ethan glad-handed his way through the building, setting up meetings with my contacts, reviewing contracts that should have crossed my desk. People I'd worked with for years suddenly became too busy for lunch, their eyes sliding away from mine in the elevator. Wednesday brought a new development. Ethan stopped by with another executive, Tom Morrison from Finance, both wearing the kind of smiles that made you check for your wallet. "Natalie, just wanted to give you a heads up," Ethan said, his tone artificially casual. "We're moving forward with Silver Rail. Contract should be signed by end of week." My compliance review recommended. "Your concerns were noted," Tom interrupted, "but the financial opportunity is too significant to pass up. The board's fully aligned." The board's fully aligned. without ever discussing it in a formal meeting where minutes would be taken. "I'll need that in writing," I said, keeping my voice level. "For the compliance files." They exchanged glances. "I don't think that's necessary," Ethan said. "We're all on the same team here." After they left, I sat in my office, staring at the Seattle skyline through my window. In 15 years of corporate life, I'd seen plenty of bad deals driven by ego or incompetence, but this was different. This had the metallic taste of something darker. I pulled up Silver Rail's incorporation documents again, this time digging deeper into the Delaware Secretary of State database. The registered agent was a law firm known for creating shell companies. The directors were all variations of the same 3 names, shuffled like a deck of cards across multiple entities. Then I found it. Buried in a footnote in their operating agreement, Silver Rail Freight was a subsidiary of Cascade Holdings, LLC, which was owned by Vertex International, which was registered in the Cayman Islands. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling thread after thread. Vertex International had one other subsidiary that I could find, a consulting firm called Strategic Vision Associates. And Strategic Vision Associates had received exactly one payment in its entire existence, according to a carelessly public financial disclosure from another company. A payment of $650,000, labeled Strategic Partnership Facilitation. From Northgate Logistics, dated 1 week ago. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. $650,000. The number burned into my retinas like staring at the sun too long. This wasn't a consulting fee. Consultants didn't get paid before services were rendered, and certainly not through a maze of shell companies that would make a money launderer proud. I needed more evidence. One suspicious payment could be explained away, dismissed as aggressive but legal tax structuring, but I knew, deep in my gut where 20 years of compliance work had honed my instincts, that this was just the tip of something much darker. I stayed late that night, waiting until the office emptied and the cleaning crew finished their rounds. At 9:30 p.m., I made my way to the accounting department. My access might be limited for executive areas, but I still had system permissions for financial compliance reviews. The transactions were buried deep, concealed under layers of legitimate expenses, but once you knew what to look for, the pattern emerged like a photograph in developing solution. The $650,000 payment to Strategic Vision Associates had been coded as Strategic Market Analysis West Coast Expansion. The approving signature was Richard Vaughn's digital stamp, but the transaction had been initiated by someone using Ethan Cole's login credentials. I took screenshots of everything, emailing them to my personal account using the encryption software I'd installed years ago for handling sensitive compliance documents. Then I dug deeper into our internal communication system, searching for any emails between Richard and Ethan mentioning Silver Rail or Strategic Vision. Most had been deleted, but our system kept backups for 90 days. Something most employees didn't know. I found fragments in the cached data. Make sure the SVA invoice processes before month end. R. Partnership terms agreed. Payment confirmed received on their end. Board won't be a problem. I've handled Morrison and the others. Each email was time-stamped between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., when they thought no one would notice the digital footprints they were leaving. The next morning, I arrived to find Ethan sitting in my office, feet up on my desk, scrolling through his phone. The power play was so obvious it was almost comical. "Natalie," he said without looking up, "heard you were accessing financial systems last night, after hours." I set my coffee down carefully, maintaining eye contact. Compliance reviews don't stop at 5 p.m. "Funny thing about compliance," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "Sometimes being too compliant can be career-limiting." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice." He stood, straightening his tie. "Richard values team players, people who understand that business sometimes requires flexibility." "Flexibility," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" His facade cracked slightly, a flash of something desperate in his eyes. "You don't understand the pressure he's under. The board wants growth. The shareholders want returns. Silver Rail is going to deliver both." "At what cost?" "That's not your concern anymore." He headed for the door, then paused. "Richard wants to see you. Executive conference room. 10 minutes. The conference room was empty except for Richard, standing at the window with his back to me. hands clasped behind him like some sort of corporate Napoleon surveying his empire. "Natalie," he said without turning, "I'm disappointed. In your inability to adapt." He turned then, his expression paternalistic. "You've been with us, 6 years? In all that time, have I ever asked you to do anything that harmed this company? You're asking me now. I'm asking you to trust me, to understand that sometimes the bigger picture requires decisions that might seem questionable when examined too closely. Questionable, like a $650,000 payment to a shell company connected to our new partner. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. His face went through several expressions: surprise, calculation, and finally, a cold smile. "You always were too smart for your own good," he said softly, "but not smart enough to know when to stop looking. If this deal goes bad, it won't, because you're going to make sure it doesn't. You're going to sign off on the compliance review. You're going to stop digging into matters that don't concern you. And you're going to support Ethan fully." He moved closer, his cologne oppressive in the small space. "Or you're going to find yourself explaining to future employers why you were terminated for cause after accusations of financial impropriety. You're threatening to frame me. I'm offering you a choice. Play ball and keep your career. Keep digging and lose everything." He pulled out his phone, showing me an email draft addressed to the board. "Concerns have been raised about Natalie Brooks accessing financial systems after hours, potentially copying sensitive data for unauthorized purposes." The implication was clear. He had logs of my access last night, twisted the right way. My investigation would look like corporate espionage. "You have until Friday to decide," he said, walking past me to the door. "The Silver Rail contract signs Monday either way." I stood alone in the conference room, my reflection staring back from the polished table. Friday, 3 days to decide between my integrity and my career. But Richard had made a critical mistake. He'd just confirmed everything I suspected, and he'd given me 3 more days to gather the evidence I needed to burn it all down. The isolation started immediately. By Thursday morning, I'd been removed from every significant email distribution list. Meeting invites were recalled with cryptic messages about restructuring priorities. People I'd worked with for years suddenly developed urgent phone calls whenever I approached their desks. But the most telling sign came when I tried to access the shared compliance drive. Access denied. My own files. Years of work. Locked behind digital walls. They were boxing me in. Cutting me off from resources. Trying to make me feel helpless. They didn't know I'd already anticipated this. Over lunch, I sat alone in the cafeteria, picking at a salad while watching Ethan hold court with a group of junior executives. He was telling some story about a golf tournament, his audience laughing too hard at mediocre punchlines. But I noticed the strain around his eyes, the way he kept checking his phone, the nervous tap of his foot under the table. "Mind if I sit?" I looked up to find Ethan standing with his tray, his entourage conspicuously absent. "Free country," I said, though we both knew freedom was relative in corporate America. He sat down, pushed his food around for a moment, then leaned in. "Natalie, this doesn't have to be adversarial." "Doesn't it?" "Richard, he's not the villain you think he is. He's trying to save this company. From what we posted record profits last quarter." Ethan's jaw worked like he was chewing words he couldn't swallow. "The board's been pressuring him. There's talk of a hostile takeover if we don't show aggressive expansion. Silver Rail gives us the numbers we need. Fake numbers built on a fraudulent partnership. Strategic numbers," he corrected, but his heart wasn't in it. "Look, I didn't want it to go down like this. Taking credit for your work. That wasn't my idea. Just following orders." He flinched. "You don't understand the position I'm in. Richard brought me in specifically for this deal. If it fails..." "You're worried about your job. I'm about to lose mine for refusing to sign off on a bribe. It's not a..." He stopped, glanced around, lowered his voice. "It's complicated. The payment ensures Silver Rail gives us exclusive rates. It's just how business is done sometimes." "No, Ethan, it's how crime is done. And when this implodes, and it will, who do you think Richard's going to throw under the bus? The compliance director who raised concerns, or the SVP who actually executed the deal?" His face went pale. I could see the gears turning. the slow realization that he might be holding a grenade with the pin already pulled. "He said you'd try to turn me against him," Ethan muttered. "I'm trying to help you see the truth. You still have time to distance yourself from this." "I can't. I'm in too deep. The payment came from my budget line. My signature's on the approval chain." His voice cracked slightly. "My wife's pregnant. We just bought a house. I can't afford to—" "Then help me stop this before it gets worse." He stood abruptly, his tray clattering. "I should go. Richard's expecting me." But as he walked away, he made a mistake, or maybe it wasn't a mistake at all. He left his phone on the table, face up, unlocked. I had maybe 30 seconds before he realized and came back. My fingers flew across his screen, forwarding 3 emails to my personal account correspondence between him and Richard about the special project, mentions of offshore accounts, and most damning, a message from Richard saying, "The $650K is just the down payment. Once the contract's signed and the board's locked in, there's another $1 million waiting." Ethan reappeared, flustered. "Sorry, forgot my—" I handed him the phone, screen now locked. "You should be more careful with this." Our eyes met. He knew what I'd done. I knew he knew, but he took the phone and walked away without a word. That afternoon, the whisper campaign against me intensified. I overheard conversations that stopped when I approached, "Always been difficult to work with. Think she's above everyone else. Probably jealous of Ethan's success." But one person wasn't participating in the character assassination, Marcus Williams from accounting, a quiet man who'd been with the company for 15 years. He appeared at my office door at 4 p.m., glancing nervously down the hallway. "Got a minute?" he asked. I waved him in, closing the door behind him. "I processed that payment," he said without preamble. "The $650K. Richard came to me personally, said it was classified executive action, but Natalie," he pulled out a USB drive. "I keep personal records of unusual transactions. Call it insurance. Marcus, you could lose your job for this. You saved mine 2 years ago during the Morrison audit. When they tried to blame discrepancies on my department, you proved it was system error, not human error." He placed the USB on my desk. "Besides, I've got kids. I don't want to work for a company that operates like this." The USB contained everything: bank routing numbers, authorization codes, even a recorded phone call where Richard explicitly instructed Marcus to bury this deep enough that even God couldn't find it. "How did you—" "Company phone system records everything for quality assurance," Marcus said with a slight smile. "They just assume nobody in accounting knows how to access the archives." As he left, I realized the tide was turning. Richard had built his conspiracy on the assumption that fear would keep everyone in line. But fear was a double-edged sword. The same people terrified of losing their jobs were also terrified of being accomplices to fraud. That night, I worked from home, compiling everything into a single, undeniable package of evidence: bank records, emails, recorded conversations, corporate structure documents showing the shell company connections. I uploaded it all to 3 different cloud services and saved a copy on an encrypted drive that I had my lawyer hold. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, fitting weather for an execution. Richard would expect my answer today. He'd expect capitulation or resignation. He wasn't going to get either. Friday morning. I arrived at the office at 6:45 a.m., well before the executive crowd would roll in. The building was quiet, just security guards and a few early bird workaholics, perfect for what I needed to do. I made my way to Marcus's desk in accounting. He'd left me a sticky note with his password, a violation of every security protocol. But we were past caring about minor infractions. I pulled up the transaction history for the past 6 months, this time with full administrative access. What I found exceeded even my worst suspicions. The $650,000 wasn't a one-time payment. There had been 3 other transfers. Smaller amounts, $150,000, $275,000, and $400,000, all routed through different shell companies, all ultimately leading back to the same Cayman Islands entity. Total nearly $1.5 million in what could only be described as kickbacks. But the real smoking gun was in the metadata. Each transaction had been initiated from Richard's computer, but during times he was officially traveling, someone had been using his access remotely, and the IP addresses traced back to a residential address in Wilmette. Richard's home address. I cross-referenced the dates with his calendar. Every single transfer had occurred while he was supposedly in meetings with board members, creating perfect alibis. Except he'd been sloppy about one thing: his corporate credit card showed charges at a coffee shop in Wilmette at the exact times the transfers were initiated. I documented everything, creating a forensic trail so clear that even the most expensive lawyers couldn't muddy it. Bank records with timestamps, credit card receipts, calendar entries, IP logs. The pattern was undeniable. Richard had been systematically looting the company while using the Silver Rail deal as cover. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "He knows you're in the building, coming to find you." I had maybe 10 minutes. I quickly uploaded the new evidence to my secured cloud drives, then did something I'd been saving as my nuclear option. I accessed the board of directors' shared drive, a place I technically shouldn't have been able to reach, but Marcus's credentials had more permissions than he probably knew. I created a new folder labeled "Urgent Compliance Review Required Before Monday Contract Signing," and uploaded everything, the entire evidence package. Then I set it to email all 15 board members at exactly 8 a.m., when I knew they'd be checking messages before the weekend. Footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets. I closed out of all systems, cleared the browser cache, and was walking back to my office when Richard appeared with Tom Morrison and 2 security guards. "Going through other people's computers now. Natalie," Richard's voice was deadly calm. "That's criminal trespass. Corporate espionage." I was reviewing financial records for compliance purposes. "Still my job? Last I checked?" "Not anymore." He held out his hand. "Badge and company phone. You're suspended pending investigation for unauthorized access to sensitive financial systems." I handed over both items, keeping my expression neutral. "I'll need that in writing." "You'll get it from legal, along with a lawsuit if any of our proprietary information shows up somewhere it shouldn't." Tom Morrison stepped forward, trying to play good cop. "Natalie, this doesn't have to escalate. We can work something out. Perhaps a generous severance package in exchange for a comprehensive NDA." "How generous?" Richard and Tom exchanged glances. 6 months salary, full benefits extension, positive reference letter. "That's interesting," I said. "Why would you offer that much to someone you're accusing of criminal activity?" "We're trying to be compassionate," Richard said through gritted teeth. "Considering your years of service." "I'll think about it. You'll have my answer Monday." "The offer expires when you leave this building," Richard snapped. "Then I guess you'll have to wait and see what I decide." Security escorted me to my office to collect personal items. I made a show of slowly packing family photos and coffee mugs while Richard watched from the doorway. His jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grinding. "You know," I said conversationally, placing a framed photo of my niece in a box. "The thing about compliance work is that it teaches you to document everything, every conversation, every transaction, every decision." "Is that supposed to be a threat?" "It's an observation. I've been documenting things for 6 years. Richard, that's a lot of observations." His face had taken on a grayish pallor. "What do you want?" "I want to leave this building without signing anything, and I want you to know that Monday's board meeting is going to be very interesting." "There's no board meeting Monday." I smiled then, the first genuine smile